We're back again.
2 in a row.
2 in a row. All right, today we are going to focus on more practicing with a purpose, specifically spare shooting. And we're not just talking about spare shooting, it's about throwing the ball straight at your spares. If it's a league shot, I don't care if you hook at your left side, it makes sense to do that because you got more room for error. But if you're going to be bowling sport shots and tournaments, you have to learn how to throw the ball straight. So we're going to be talking about that today.
When you get dialed in, throwing straight at all your spares, you'll find yourself doing it all the time, and it just helps. I'm guilty of not doing it as well, so
we're going to be talking about what are different ways that you can accomplish getting the ball straight with your hand. What do you do with the ball? And then once you've got that dialed in on how you throw it, we're going to be talking about what is a good spare regimen to incorporate to actually practice, so that you can practice not just your 7s and 10s, but as you start to incorporate the 6-pin, the 3-pin, the 2-pin, multiple pins together. There are different things that you can do, and there's multiple ways that are correct. I'm just going to tell you which way is my way, and then some other ways that you can also consider trying as well. You have to do what works best for you, but I'm going to talk with you about what my spare practice regimen actually is, go through those particular steps, and hopefully if you follow something similar, you'll be able to see a lot more spare conversions. Before we get into the actual practice though, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, so that helps us out. Okay, so with that said, let's get it done. So we're going to talk about different ways of what to do with your hand and your wrist in order to achieve getting that ball to go straight. There's essentially a couple of different ways that are key to doing this. If you're a one-handed bowler, it's about coming up straight behind the ball, okay? Flattening that out, rolling that thing end over end. I think Bill O'Neill is the perfect example of somebody who's able to do this. E.J. Tackett, even though he throws the ball 100 miles an hour at his spares, you'll see he comes straight up behind the ball, rolls end over end. Packy Hanrahan has a two-hander. It's on the left-hand side. He actually, his isn't so much behind the ball. His hand is still this way, but he rolls it over the end of his hand, so it's going end over end. So achieving an end over end roll is going to be one way to do it. I don't generally do this simply because I have arthritis in my wrist, and doing this and going straight through is kind of painful.
all old people jokes welcome.
Yeah, but I am going to try to demonstrate that here. So, all right, so I'm going to shoot at a 10-pin. I may not pick it up because, like I said, this is not the way I typically do it. It's painful on the wrist.
And the lanes are torched.
And this is what I'm going to do for you, though. I'm going to put myself through pain just to show you how you can throw the ball end over end. So what I'm going to do is, instead of focusing on really torquing the wrist, I'm going to really focus on keeping my hand straight behind the ball and coming through. And I actually want to, as I follow through, I want to see my hand flat, not over this way. So it had a little bit of hook to it, so it wasn't perfectly end over end, but it was pretty end over end. I'm gonna throw a piece of tape on there to make it a little easier to see. I'm putting the tape right above the finger holes, okay? My finger holes are kind of wonky, but right over the finger holes so that we can see where is it going. All right, the tape was on the side, but as I came through, I was really trying to keep my hand this way. So my fingers, the tape was on the left side of the ball anyways. So as it was rolling down, it was still rolling perfectly end over end. So the tape was just on that side, but it was end over end. I missed because I missed my mark, because again, that's not how I typically throw it. But that's one way to achieve getting that ball going straight. Now, hand position number 2, which is something I do, which is more of a suitcase of it, okay? So now, instead of coming straight up behind it, I'm coming up on the side of it, but my objective here is to not torque the wrist. I'm not trying to flick it and make that ball hook a lot. I might still move my hand a little bit, but what I'm really trying to achieve here is just letting go. Thumbs, fingers, all at the same time. The ball's gonna have revolutions on it, but now instead of having 330 to 380 revolutions, now we're gonna get like 9. Like there's not gonna be much on it. So
9.
So the ball, it may hook a little bit because it is still rotating that direction, but that is gonna be so minimal. This is where having a spare ball is important. This is actually urethane ball. I do have a Storm Mix, which I throw a lot for practice or for spare balls. Works very well. Doesn't really hook at all for me. You can throw a white dot or any of the other plastic balls and it won't hook. I'm trying to work on throwing my urethane because the hook is very, very minimal and it takes up one less spot in my bag. So when I go to tournaments, I can take this and not have to use up a space for a plastic ball. But what I'm going to work on here is coming out a little more suitcase on the side, but just letting go, thumbs and fingers at the same time, not lifting with the fingers.
You can throw a 1999 zebra ball out of the garden if you have one of those.
That you could do. All right. So here, again, you're going to see a little bit of rotation, a little bit of movement. So there, you saw the tape kind of spinning a little more like that. It was almost spinning, the ball was almost spinning like a top, but again, it's very, very few revolutions on that ball. And the whole objective is just to get that ball to not hook very much at all. Do that one more time. Perfect 10-pin conversion. That's how I like to throw at them. I've been doing that for many, many years. I used to actually throw my strike ball, and because I'm putting so little on it, I could throw my strike ball, but because it's got some surface, or got some tackiness to the surface, I do get a little afraid that if outside the score, it's just gonna pop a little bit and I might miss. So I still like to throw a spare ball. The third thing that you can consider is especially if you're a two-hander, it can be more difficult to do some of these things, like coming, because you don't have your thumb in it anyway, so coming out, putting no revs on it, or coming straight behind the ball can be challenging. Even if you're a right-hander, if you have a hard time changing the way you throw the ball a lot, you can just throw a plastic ball, okay? Now, this isn't mine, I'm not gonna throw it, but
I got you.
yeah, Troy will throw it here, show you, but what I wanna tell you is watch Jason Belmonte, watch Kyle Troop. These guys don't really change how they're throwing the spare. Belmonte does kind of let go a little bit with his fingers, but there's a lot of revolutions happening. Now with that, it is important that you're throwing a plastic ball. And in Belmonte's case, he's throwing a polyester ball. He's not throwing, like even a Storm Mix. A Mix is actually a polished urethane ball, and there are guys that can get that ball to hook, and I bet if Belmonte threw that, it would hook a little bit. So it's even more important to not be throwing just a polished urethane or a urethane ball, but throw an actual plastic or polyester ball like this one here. So go ahead, Troy.
I was that guy that I didn't have a plastic ball. I just took my strike ball and I moved left and I just threw it hard and straight. And that worked for me for quite a while. I'm older now. Things hurt, can't keep that up, so which is why I pulled this out of the garden. Throwing a plastic ball, you don't have to change the way you throw the ball. You can throw it the same and it's not going to hook. You don't ever have to worry about that. So.
All right, so got the 10 pin down. Here's the tricky part is now we gotta go to left side spares. You're gonna shoot at 7 pins. And with 7 pins, it can be very easy as a right-hander to just crank the ball or hook the ball at those 7 pins. And again, in a league shot, I don't really care if you do that. On a house shot, you're gonna have so much room that it's actually not a bad thing to do because you miss it right, it's gonna hit the dry, hook all the way over, cover your 7. And you pull it inside in the oil, it's gonna hold it a little bit, it's gonna cover the 7. So you have room, it's not a bad thing. But if you're gonna bowl a lot of sports shots and tournaments, you're not gonna be able to do that. You cannot miss your mark, and oftentimes there's so much of a difference from one board to the next that hooking at it is just not a good idea. So you want to implement the same strategies in how you're releasing the ball at the 7, whether that's coming straight behind it, whether that's cranking at your spare ball, or in my case, suitcasing it and kind of just letting go with all of your fingers and thumb at the same time. So I'm going to shoot at a couple 7 pins here. So same thing, I'm getting a little bit of revolution on it, but it's really, really light. And with adding to that, either throwing a plastic ball or in my case a urethane ball, it's not really hooking. It's hooking a tiny bit, a couple boards and that's all, but I've managed on, I know exactly where to throw it, and it doesn't matter what the length condition is, it's gonna look like that. Next thing we gotta talk about is what is the actual practice regimen that I go through, not just for those pins, but for other pins on the deck as well, or other multiple spare shots. So we're gonna be talking about that next. So when it comes to my spare practice regimen and looking at different pins, I always start with my 10 pin. So where do I like to stand and where do I like to aim that's gonna cover the 10 pin? So in my case, I like to stand on 31 and I like to throw right between third and fourth arrow. So somewhere around 17.5 is what I'm aiming for here. So I'm gonna line up 20, this is 20, 25, 30, 31. 31 is where I like to stand. The reason I do this, why I stand here instead of way to the outside, is because outside is better, you get a better angle, but I don't like being up against the ball return on the right-hand blade. So I have taught myself to, as long as you're flattening out, throwing straight, it doesn't really matter. So I'm gonna stand my heel on 31, okay? I'm still gonna do the same thing, letting go all fingers and thumbs same time, going for somewhere around 17.5. So that was inside slightly, maybe 18, but that would have covered it just fine. So if I know that that's my mark, the best thing you can do is keep a journal. Write down, okay, I'm standing 31, I'm throwing 17.5, that's gonna cover my 10 pin. And if I would have hit 17.5, I would have hit the 10 pin probably more dead on. Because I was closer to 18, I would have hit a little more on the left side, still would have covered it. But if I'm thinking about what's gonna hit that 10 pin pretty close to head on, that's the line I wanna start with. So now I think about, what if the 6 pin is with it? Not by itself, but I have a 6 and a 10. I don't want to hit the 10 straight on, even though that might cover the 6. It's going to be too close to possibly, if I miss just a hair right, I'm going to pick the 10 clean off. So I'm going to move one board to the right with my feet, keep my mark exactly the same. So now, instead of standing 31, I'm going to move one board over to 30. So now I'm standing 30. Now I'm going to throw over 17.5 as my target again. I covered the 6-10 nicely, okay? Piece of cake. Now if I want the 6 by itself, I don't want to hit the right side of the 6 pin, I want to hit the 6 pin dead on. So I'm going to move a little bit again. I might move another board or two. In my case, I'm going to move another board and a half. So I'm a total of 2.5 boards to the right of where I started. So I started 31. I'm going 1, 2, 2.5 boards, which is essentially half of a dot. This is where I'm going to go to try to cover the 6 pin head on. So if I have a 6 pin by itself, this is where I'm going to stand. Okay, had the 6 pin been there, it would have hit that thing dead on. So keep inching over now. So what's the next thing I'm going to leave? You're going to add a 3 pin, but I want to talk about the 3-10 baby split. 3-10 baby split, you want to just barely nick the 3 pin, which I technically did there, so that would have been a good spot. But I like to be 4 boards right of where my 10 pin shot was. So if I was 31, now I'm 1, 2, 3, 4. Now I'm standing 27. 27, aiming for the same spot, 17.5. I'm going for a 3-10 baby split conversion. That would have covered the 3-10 nicely. And I will say, since I started working on that and writing down exactly where I'm standing and exactly where I'm throwing, and because I practice it, I don't just practice the 10s, I move back and forth and I aim at all of these during my practice session, my 3-10 conversion rate has gone up significantly. So now, 3-6-10, okay? The 3-10, I'm nicking the 3 pin. That gets you dangerously close to, if you miss it a hair right, you're gonna miss the 3 pin. So I'm gonna move another board to the right because I wanna hit the 3 pin a little heavier, hit more on the left side of the 6, kick the 6 into the 10. So if I leave it 3-6-10, now I'm gonna move 5 boards for my 10 pin spot. I was at 31, now I'm gonna move all the way over here to 26, all right? So 26, same mark, still shooting for 17.5. I got that a little wide. I got that a hair wide, but I still covered that nicely. Gave me a little bit of room, and that's the reason why I moved over a little bit. It gave me that ability to move up, to miss by a board right, and still cover that up nicely. All right. Now, if you have a 3-6-9-10 or a 3-6-9, you've got that sleeper back there. That's a whole different ball game. You're either going to have to figure out how to hook at it, or you're going to have to play a completely different angle to hit on the left side of that 3 and hitting it much heavier. But what I want to do next is I want to jump to the other side. We've got the right side spares good. I got my 10, I got my 6-10, I got my 6-pin, I got my 3-10, I got my 3-6-10. You could go even another board now if I want to hit the 3-pin head on. If I leave a 3-pin by itself, now I'm going to move another board and a half probably. So I was here at 26, going to 25 is another board and a half, so I'm at 24 and a half, going for, so basically I'm probably going to nick the head pin on the right side, or maybe just cover that 9-pin on its own. And that would have taken the 3-pin out nicely, okay? Now, we're going to shift to the right-hand side. You can do everything I just showed you. You can do the same thing by keeping your feet in the same spot, but instead moving your mark. Okay, if you want to stand on 31 and aim 17.5 at your 10, but now you leave a 6-pin, you might want to move your mark from 17.5 to maybe 18.5 or 19. You're going to change your mark left a little bit to start covering those as well. That works just fine. You just have to practice it and write down what is it, where am I standing, where am I aiming. I'm not suggesting you even stand on 31 and aim 17.5. That works for me. It also depends on how much do you drift. Do you drift left, do you drift right, or do you walk straight? You might start on 31 but drift way to the left and you end up farther left than I do. So you just need to mark down what works for you. Where do you want to stand, where do you want to throw at your 10 pins, and then make the appropriate adjustments from there. If we're going to shoot at a 7, I do the opposite of what I do on the right side. So on the right side, I move my feet and I keep my mark. For the left side, I don't like to stand too far right. I think it's a great practice to stand all the way to the right and cover all the lanes. But for me personally, I don't want to cross my body too much. So I focus on making sure my shoulders stay square. I don't open them at all. I really try to focus. And I almost think about pitching a horseshoe, where I'm keeping everything straight. Or if I'm playing bags, for example, that's another good example. But I'm going to stand with my left foot on 20, which is the middle dot. And I'm going to find out what is my mark to cover that 7-pin, which in my case is probably going to be somewhere between 4th and 5th arrow. So we're probably looking at about 23. So that was closer to 21. That was closer to 21, and I still would have covered it, but I would have covered the right side of the 3-pin. I do know that that mark is going to work pretty well. All right, I'm going to go ahead and shoot that 7 one more time. Standing 20. Okay, I'm going to let go of my fingers and thumbs same time, keeping my shoulders square, pointed at my target, aiming for somewhere around 22, 23. Again, that was closer. That was probably 21 and a half, 22, so not bad. All right, so now what we're gonna do, we got the 7-pin down. I'm standing 20, I'm aiming somewhere around 22 and a half. Now I wanna say, let's take the 4-pin, add the 4-pin to it. I'm gonna keep my feet on 20, but I'm gonna move my mark. Instead of going over about 22 and a half, I'm gonna go somewhere around 20 to 21. That was right. I got that closer to 19, but again, that afforded me the room to be able to miss by a little bit, and that was okay. I still covered the 4, would have covered the 4-7 just fine. From this angle, I don't necessarily need to get the left side of the 4. I'm just trying to cover that 4-7, and at this angle, it's less likely you're going to chop it off. So I keep the same mindset of what I was doing before while I moved my mark about a board and a half to cover that 4-pin. If I'm going to cover the 2-7, which I don't have up here, but if I were going to cover that, I'm going to move another board or two to the right with my eyes, keeping my feet at 20. Now I'm going to aim somewhere around probably 19. See, I hit closer to 20, 21, and I would have missed that left. But I know that that's the mark, and I'm going to keep practicing that until I get it down to where I'm going to cover the left side of the 2 to cover the 2-7 consistently. Now let's throw And I'm going to do the same thing in this case, whether it's a 210, 2.7 or 2.47. Not likely going to leave a lot of 2.47s, but let's say you leave a 2-pin by itself. I'm going to move it in a little bit more yet again, keeping my feet on 20. Now I'm aiming between 3rd and 4th arrow, so now I'm looking more around probably 17.5 to 18. So there, I actually hit what I was aiming for previously, and I would have covered the 2.7 pretty good, but I still covered the 2-pin if it was there by itself. So that tells me again, I've got some room. Had I hit about 17.5, 18, I probably would have covered that pin just fine. I'm going to do that one more time. Now, if you have a 2.8 or a 2.8.7 or a 2.4.8 or 2.4.8.7, something like that, and you got to cover that sleeper, you may want to try to hook at it, but again, if you have to throw it straight, you want to dial in on that shot. So I'm going to, if I left a 2.8, it's even more important that I'm going to cover closer to 17.5 in order to hit the 2-pin straight back into the 8. Right. So that was just a little bit left, probably would have missed it. So I'm also getting used to that urethane ball, so it does hook a tiny bit compared to my plastic ball. With my mix, I probably would have covered a 2.8 there. This ball moves a tiny bit because of the way I'm throwing it, so I have to come back here and practice some more and adjust my target probably just a little bit.
So you guys, man, I hope you enjoyed that. I enjoyed listening to it. It's been a long time since you and I have had a technical practice session. Knowing that he's out on the regional tour now, listening to him as dialed in as he is, and I mean, you saw it, right? There were no edits through there. Like he was getting these, and he knows the stuff. So that is not going to be everybody's game. But that's his textbook, right? Take his textbook, and if it works for you, great. But you can adjust off of that and make it your own. And that's what we all do. So run with it. I hope you learn from it. Because it works.
And that's what's important. He said the word textbook, and it's that, like he said, you're going to create your own textbook. But I want you to actually write it down. Get a journal, write it down, practice with a purpose. If it's not right, if you write down you stand 31 and you're aiming 17.5 and you write that down because it looked like it worked, but then you throw it a few more times and it looks like it's not working, you have to adjust it, cross it out, and rewrite it down. Do it until you find out, where is my 10-pin shop? And not just covering the 10, but where are you crossing? Not just where you're aiming, but look at where you're actually crossing. Where are you crossing, and what is covering the 10-pin pretty much head on? Okay, if you're barely nicking the left side of the 10-pin, that's not the area that you want to shoot for. You want to aim a little right of that. It's okay that you go there. You're trying to create a little bit of misroom. So you want to write down, what do you cross, where you stand, and where do you cross to hit the 10-pin dead on. Same thing with your 7-pin dead on. And once you have those two dialed in, you can decide whether you're a foot mover or whether you're a mark mover or somewhere in between the two. But think about how many boards you need to move with either or both, and write that down as well. Say, okay, if I leave a 6-10, I'm going to do this adjustment. If I leave a 6-pin, I'm going to do this adjustment. If it's a 3-10, it's this adjustment. And keep on writing that down and have that book so that as you get into these tournaments, if you leave a 3-10, you can go to the book and say, okay, I know this is where I need to stand, this is where I need to throw, and chances are, unless something's crazy, chances are you're going to cover it. Now, you might be the kind who's throwing a plastic ball and still throwing all your revs on it, and the lanes are absolutely bone dry. The ball is going to hook a little bit, so you have to make some adjustments. This is the benefit of not doing that style and actually trying to flatten it out. It's not going to change much from shot to shot, but you may have to do some on-the-fly figuring out, but this at least gives you a basis to start from. So hopefully you guys got some benefit out of this. Again, please hit that subscribe button, like, share it, comment on it. Let us know what your moves are.
Yeah,
let us know what your regimen is for practicing your corner pins, or what struggles you might have and things that we may be able to help you out with. So most of all, thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. Out.
Ditto.